Hi guys, and welcome to the budget series. If you haven't already seen the buyers and sellers guides, then make sure you check out the cards up above where you can check those out. But this video though is all about building and benchmarking the best PC you can buy for under £200, all with used parts. We're going to be bringing you guys along for the ride, so let's get into it. So as with most things in life, apparently it got really complicated and took an absolute age for this to finally happen. So let me walk you through the series of events that led us to this point, the benchmarks that I was able to run, and kind of the moral of the story. So I started off with speccing a setup out on eBay. It came to £188 total, which was 56 for the system. I think about £80 for an RX 460 graphics card that didn't have a power connector because I didn't want to change the power supply in this for this build, and the power supply in this won't have any 6 or 8 pin power connectors for graphics cards. And I also put in some new RAM in the setup as well, and also an SSD because SSDs are crucial in any older systems, so highly recommend it. Now the second that I stopped recording, I refreshed the page to go and actually buy the stuff that I selected, but the graphics card had already been bought, and so I ended up only getting the system itself, and actually already had the SSD that I was going to buy anyway. So for the purposes of testing, I thought I'll throw that one in, and got the system all good, except the system was listed as a Dell Optiplex 780. So that's the one that I did all my research on and based what I was buying on that system and the PCIe slots and configuration, the RAM and all that sort of stuff. It turns out that this is actually a Dell Optiplex 380, which is actually quite different. The biggest difference is that this is an inverted chassis and has one PCIe slot right at the top, which means the graphics card has to be a single slot card only, and its mounting hardware for the CPU cooler is directly in line with the back of the PCIe slot, meaning that I can't have a graphics card that is all that much longer than a PCIe slot, so I had to go back to eBay and find a graphics card that would fit. Now, luckily, I found an RX 460, which is what I was planning on getting anyway, the 4GB model actually, surprisingly, from MSI for £69 posted, and that was awesome. It is a true r/perfect fit moment when I tried to put it in, because a hair couldn't fit behind the back of the graphics card and the back of the mounting hardware. It really is just the perfect fit to get that in there. I was very pleased with that and went about my way. Now I installed all of the games and testing software and all that sort of stuff, only to find that the system was incredibly slow. There was two main reasons for this. One was the RAM, but the actual major one was actually the dual core CPU that came in this. So again, back to eBay, I picked up a Q9550, which is a quad core, which is very similar to the Q9600. It's just ever so slightly slower, but has the same amount of cache, and it runs at 2.83 gigahertz at stock, which this board fully supports. So picked one up and was very happy. I threw the chip in, only to find out that once I'd rebooted into Windows, the graphics card had stopped working properly. It just kept coming up with a no AMD graphics card detected. Please install the relevant driver for your card. I then went to Device Manager and found that it said Windows had stopped this device because it detected an error, code 43. So a bit of Googling, couldn't really find anything, so I assumed anyway, since the graphics card was working fine with the dual core, that it was just a compatibility issue, or the chip that I'd got, because it was a used chip, maybe it had some damage, or compatibility issues or something like that. So I returned the chip and got a replacement. So I dropped in the replacement CPU, and lo and behold, it's got the same issue. So I tested it with a known good system, an 8700K system that I'd already had built and ready, just minus a graphics card. So I put that one in, and again, lo and behold, same issue. So the graphics card had just upped and died on me. I guess I gotta go back to eBay again. Now, because of the size and compatibility issues with this system, the form factor that I was looking for just doesn't seem to exist anymore in any reasonable configuration. I was finding GT710s and GT1030s, but those are a bit too low power for what I was really looking for, so I had to go a little bit upmarket, and I finally found a 1050 Ti or a 1050 Mini from Zotac, which is the perfect card for this. It's the exact length of a PCIe slot. It is 2 slot in terms of it's cooler, but that doesn't matter because the rear I/O doesn't have any DVI ports or anything sticking at the top. It's just a standard single slot. It also doesn't have any power connectors, so really this is the perfect card to throw in here. And finally, after all of that, I have a working system that I can benchmark. So let's take a look at those benchmark results. All of them are at 1080p on either medium or low settings. In fact, actually, I'll flash up the settings that I was using. So for PUBG, it was on, I think, medium to low. For Fortnite, it was on, I think, medium settings as well. With Rocket League, it was on performance, so, you know, medium to low settings. And then for Rainbow Six Siege, it was on medium to low as well there too. Starting off with Rocket League then, we actually had a very smooth gameplay experience at 135 FPS average, with 121 as the minimum and the maximum of 157, so very smooth gameplay. Siege was equally still pretty smooth at around about 64 FPS with a minimum of 50 and a maximum of 77, so you're not going to be pushing high refresh rate displays. That's not kind of the point of this build anyway. PUBG was a little bit slower at 51 FPS, which is obviously below the most desirable 60 FPS mark, but still relatively playable with a minimum of 28 and a maximum of 64. And Fortnite is, as you can see, a little bit better optimized at 69 FPS average, with a minimum of 37 and a maximum of 111. Overall, pretty smooth still though. Now, as you've seen, it does pretty well in most games. CPU utilization did hit 100%, but so did RAM utilization. So if you were following in my footsteps with this build, then I highly recommend, if you've got some extra cash to spare here, I would recommend putting 8 gigs, which is this system's maximum supported configuration, by the way, because it only has 2 RAM DIMM slots at 4 gig maximum. Then I would highly recommend putting that in there because it would make a very big difference. I actually tried to run 16 gigs in this, or even 8 gigs in a single channel, but it just straight up would not work, and I had to go back to the standard RAM, which I would have then upgraded, but also when you take into account the budget, as we'll talk about in a second, it just wasn't feasible. So how much did this system actually cost? Well, the Dell Tower was £56.10 delivered. The graphics card that I ended up with, the 1050, was 120. The SSD, if you were buying one for this build, which I am including because I used it here, would be 41 new, and then the CPU was £23. So overall that comes to about £240, which I very much am very understanding of the fact that £240 is more than £200, which is what the video is titled, but let me explain. If the original graphics card, the 460, which obviously would have been a slightly less performing card, was functioning and I didn't have to go and buy the 1050 as a replacement for that one, then the system total price would be £189 as it's spec'd here. Of course, you can add some more RAM, which would have brought it over the £200 mark, but because of the swap in graphics card, which does mean a bit more performance, but also it was physically the only one that I could find in time to make this video, it does get a little bit more expensive, but that kind of leads me into the moral of the story here. If you're gonna build a used PC like this one and you want the best value for money possible, then you're gonna be trading off your time for the money you're spending. If you're willing to spend more money, then you can go buy newer or even a full new system, and that's all good. But if you're, say, a student with lots of time but a very small fixed amount of money, then building a used PC is probably the better way to go. You're going to find dead hardware, you're going to return stuff, you're gonna find compatibility issues, and you're going to have to spend a load of time trying to find the right hardware at the right price. But as I said, that is the trade-off you are making when it comes to building and buying a used PC. But look at what you get in return. For £270, if you include the RAM, you get a gaming PC that is faster than any of the AMD APU systems that are currently selling for between £500 and £600, aka more than double the price. And you're looking at a PC that has upgrade options in terms of you can put a faster CPU in if you want to. Obviously, you can add some more RAM if you don't already include that in the price. And of course, you can throw in a better GPU if you can find one that fits. Now, is it the perfect solution for everyone? Well, the obvious answer there is no. As I said, it's a trade-off for how much time and effort you're willing to spend on finding the right parts at the right price for the amount of money you're willing to spend on them. Of course, this is an interesting look at the used market, and do bear in mind, if you do want to follow in my footsteps with this build, then you're not necessarily going to find the exact same system for the exact same price or any of the other parts that I've mentioned. The pricings that I mentioned are totally dependent on the current, market availability, so do keep that in mind if you do want to try and follow the footsteps here. With that said, I actually don't need this system anymore. I will be keeping the SSD and the graphics card for future projects, but the rest of the system, the quad core with 4 gigs of RAM and 160 gig hard drive, is kind of available. Now I'm considering selling it just because of recouping some of the costs, including 2 graphics cards that went into this project, but if you are someone who could really do with this right now, then join the Discord and message me on there, and especially if you're not in the UK, as long as you're willing to cover postage costs, although ideally if you're willing to cover postage costs in the UK as well, that'd be great. But if you're if you feel like you're in need of this system, then message me on there and I'll see what I can do. So that kind of nicely rounds out the budget series. If you want to help me recoup some of the costs from this series, then feel free to check out the Amazon and Overclockers UK affiliate links in the description down below. They don't cost you anything to use, but massively help me out, and you can use them for anything on either of the sites, from garden sheds on Amazon to power supplies on Overclockers. There's also a load of other links like Humble Bundle, where you can get cheap games and support charities, or private internet access, which is a great and cheap VPN, and Patreon, who the guys on Patreon helped support this build in the first place, so massive thank you to those guys. If you want to be a patron and support me and get cool rewards for doing so, then you can check that out there. You can also check out the subscribe button if you don't have any extra money or you're not planning on buying stuff from Amazon or Overclockers, and you can check out the rest of the budget series and some other videos over there too. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. I would love to hear what you thought of the series in the comments down below, and we'll see you all in the next video.